My experience as a non-furry at a furry convention. I had always wanted to go to a convention of some kind. I never ended up going to any due to reasons like not finding the time and not seeing any that greatly piqued my interest. It was nearing the end of the summer, and I was curiously looking around online to see if there were any that were relatively near me. I took notice that there was a certain con happening in Philadelphia at the end of the summer. Furrydelphia, 2023. Obviously, this was a furry convention, where members of the furry community online come together to socialize and interact with one another. For context, I live in New Jersey, and Philadelphia was less than a 2-hour drive, so it was within a reasonable commute for me. Also, the convention was happening at a known hotel in the downtown area of the city, meaning that it would make the most sense for it to be an overnight stay at the hotel the convention is taking place in. When I found out about this, I jokingly asked some of my nearby friends if they would ever consider going to a furry convention. They showed slight interest in the fact that if we did, it might be worth it just to have the story to tell. A few days of back and forth proceeded before we began to seriously consider committing to it by booking a room at the hotel in question. So with that, in late July, we decided to make it official and book the room, effectively locking ourselves into going. For the following month leading up to going to the con, we couldn't help but ask ourselves ridiculous hypothetical questions about what would happen. I told several friends about the whole thing and assured them that I was only going because I had heard lots of stories over the years about what happens at these, and I wanted to see it for myself, firsthand. It would surely make for a story I would have for the rest of my life, as well as the added novelty of going to the most extreme example of a convention most people can think of. Also, an important note is that for the upcoming Halloween this year, I was planning on going as a plague doctor. I had gotten my costume early, and I figured it would be the perfect thing to wear while in the convention halls. It would allow me to stand out, but also blend in, and more importantly, it would cover my face and most of my body, allowing for complete anonymity, and I didn't want my face ending up somewhere online. Also, if I'm being honest, I think it's fun to dress up. In the final week, just before the event, I was actually getting excited. I planned on taking lots of pictures, learning more about the culture, and maybe even make some new friends. The friends I had prepared on going with expressed their concerns over how they're going to react being face to face with such a dedicated group of people. I considered myself self-assured about how I think it would be an interesting experience regardless of how things turned out. When the morning of Saturday, August 26th, finally came, I made the trek to my friend's house and we took their car, and once everyone was picked up, we headed straight to Philadelphia. For the beginning of the road trip, I talked about how hyped I was and how crazy it felt that it was finally happening. However, the closer we got to our destination, I noticed a pit feeling in my stomach that got more and more intense the closer we got. Consciously, I was still excited to finally be getting close, but subconsciously it appeared as though I was preparing myself for some sort of unbelievable scene of horrible sights. As we rolled into the city and were nearby the hotel the con took place in, we began seeing people in costume. Our collective anxiety only grew. When we pulled in front of the hotel to figure out the parking situation, furries in costume were just outside the venue for us to see. When we were finally in eyesight of several of these people at once, our uncomfortability levels were at their limit. However, we had the strength to stay true to our commitment and pressed onwards. I think we all took comfort in the fact that we had each other to rely on if shit were to hit the fan. We parked in a nearby parking garage, gathered our belongings, and walked through the front entrance and then into the hotel. The in-person sight of seeing large groups of people all wearing anthropomorphic animal costumes certainly is strange. Once we collected ourselves and got past the initial shock of the situation, we checked in and went up to the elevators and got settled into our room. We talked about the list of events scheduled to happen and decided to keep things mostly spontaneous. I pulled out my plague doctor costume and got dressed, then we ventured out of the comfort of our room and onto the convention floors. We got registered and proceeded to walk around the various stories of the convention to get our bearings and familiarize ourselves with the building. That was when the day had really begun for us. We, as outsiders, were now engaging with a fandom that is often looked down upon with great discomfort. As we walked around the floors, I was somewhat surprised to find that several people would come up to me throughout the day and ask to take their pictures with me. I had no gripes with this, as taking pictures with these individuals was a goal I had. And if I'm being honest, it was nice to feel welcomed by an entirely new community whom I have had very to little no communication with prior. They were very kind to me, and I ended up meeting a lot of people and had several conversations about how this is my first convention. My friends had branched off to do their own thing for a while, and I was left to interact and converse with my fellow internet strangers. Not only had I gotten several pictures, but people passing by couldn't help but comment on how much they liked my costume. Some recognized it as SCP-049 from the SCP series of various games and forums. After about an hour, I met back up with my friends and we decided to go to a local pizza place. The convention handbook had given to us after receiving our day passes had a list of local food places that were all within walking distance of the hotel. After the brief lunch break, we went back into the hotel and explored more of the convention. After a bit of searching around, we discovered that there was a main event soon to take place in the main venue hall. It was a dance competition. I expressed interest in going, but my friends had their reservations and wished to branch off once more. I was there to be at the convention, however, and I planned to learn and engage as much as I could. I ended up striking a conversation and befriended a person that was standing next to me in line. After some talking, we were shuffled into the hall where it was happening and grabbed some seats. The dance competition was interesting to say the least. There were roughly 15 dancers, all in full fursuits that individually gave their performances to the crowd and to the judges. Some of the dancers were actually pretty good. However, all the ones I thought were going to place in the competition didn't even get third. Based on things people were telling me, it seemed as though they were judging based on the dancer themselves and their place in the community. While there seemed to be an unobjective nature to the judging of it, it didn't matter that much to me. After that, my friends and I retreated to our room to prepare for going out once more for food and drinks. While we were out and walking through the city, we noticed a fire truck dashing by. I joked about how the convention goers were probably disabling fire alarms again. We went to a nearby bar and grill, and while spending some time there, we noticed the hashtag for the con was blowing up with imagery of fire trucks and alarms going off. When I saw this, I was appalled at the fact that we were missing it. I finished my portion of the meal, paid, and went back to the hotel as I didn't want to miss anything exciting. When I walked into the front door, I asked some con staff what had happened. They went on to tell me that it was merely a genuine false alarm. One of the smoke detectors had malfunctioned in one of the main event rooms, and sadly, it was not because of some drunken idiot that had pulled a random fire alarm trigger in a hallway somewhere. As a funny side note, while going up on the elevators, I went in with an older gentleman who appeared to be working for the hotel and was bringing bags up to a room. During that time in the elevator, he looks at me and says to me, "I feel like I'm dreaming." I just laughed and agreed with him. After that, I went back to my room, dressed up once more, and went back to the convention floors. There was a big rave party happening in the main event room, and I decided to jump in. It was pretty much what you'd expect: music, lights, smoke, dancing, etc. You can actually see me in this video I found after the fact. After about a half hour in there, I left and wandered around more, and I kept chatting with random strangers and talking about the convention. Once it got late, however, I was on the prowl for any open room parties I could find. I had heard lots of stories of people having tons of drinks and things to smoke at these cons, and I thought it would be fun to engage with some of that if I could find it. I kept getting off elevators on random floors and walking up and down the halls, seeing if maybe I could get lucky and stumble across some open door with people drinking and smoking. It slowly became more obvious to me that this was a pretty tame convention, and all things considered, maybe that was for the best. I did this for about a half hour before retreating back to my room where my friends were doing some drinking of their own. It was getting late at this point anyway, and after lots of walking around, we were all pretty tired. One by one, we all crashed with Avatar: The Last Airbender playing on the TV in the background. While trying to fall asleep, I couldn't help but think of everything that had happened that day. All the people I met, all the pictures I took, and all the events I went to. All I could do was try and summarize the events in my mind into a few select feelings. The biggest feeling I got from all this, that I just couldn't shake off, was that I think I actually had a fun time. The following morning, we each took our time getting up, cleaning ourselves, and getting packed. We checked out just before noon, and before leaving the city for good, we stopped to get some breakfast at a local cafe. The car ride back was filled with mental unpacking, reminiscing, and overall thoughts on the whole event. Once I eventually got back into my own car, I was able to more clearly contemplate and absorb all the happenings of the weekend. While I went in not knowing what to expect and going merely planning to be a wallfly, I ended up finding some enjoyment out of dressing up and meeting new people. Also, admittedly, the added ego boost of people constantly wanting to take pictures with me certainly helped. Would I go again? I'm not so sure. I think I've achieved satisfaction keeping it as a one-time thing I did with friends, but I would be lying if I said I didn't get a good kick out of the whole thing. All in all, if there's any lesson to be learned here, I think it's that you shouldn't restrict yourself from trying new things or going places you've never gone before because of the what-if questions you may ask yourself. I took a pretty big risk going to such an extreme, niche convention I'd never been to before, but I'd say it paid off. If any members of the community or attendees of the con see this video, all I want to say is that I had a fun time. I did feel welcomed, and everyone I met was very nice. Sure, they've got their quirks, but who doesn't? And that about wraps up my experience as an outsider at a furry convention. Thanks for sticking around this long, and good luck out there. See you all later.